Okay guys, we're going to get started. So for this career seminar, I am very happy to have Prajwal Kulkarni here, Praj, as you can call him. And so Praj got his PhD from Stanford in 2009, and after that did a science policy fellowship in DC, and then he actually transitioned again into sort of the industry side of things, where he's a product designer at EMS Software. So he has a rich array of experiences to talk to you about today. And I also wanted to prep you for the fact that during this session, there will be some interactive stuff. So if you're hoping to just sit there like a lump for 50 minutes, Praj has some activities planned for you. So
you can mostly sit as a lump. Maybe a little bit of movement.
Yes, there are prizes, lemon bars and brownies. All right, so let's welcome Praj.
Thanks, Stephanie. All right, hi everyone. As Stephanie said, my name is Praj, and to just give you a little bit more background about myself, I was born and raised till I was 12 in Kingston, Jamaica. I then moved to New York City for a couple of years, and the suburbs of Philly for high school, Penn State for college, and California for grad school, DC for 2 years for public policy, and now I live in Denver. When people ask me where I'm from, I usually just say Philly. That's where I think of as home. If you ask me where I'm from originally, then I say, oh my God. Anyway, so here's the title of my talk, From Plasma Physics to Product Management. And the big overarching goal that I have is to help all of you. I was once in your position in grad school, not too long ago. I'm just 34, turning 35 in a few weeks. And I know I had career angst, and what do I do, and where do I go from here? So I hope at the end of all this is all of you can take something away from it as you start reflecting and thinking and entering your own career. And I'd like to start off with one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite writers. Freddie DeBoer asks us to consider the possibility that other adults could review the same evidence you have, experience the same experiences, have the same purchase on the world, be of the same moral discrimination, and yet conclude something differently than we have concluded. Later on, he says tastes are just tastes. They reflect not the character and content of the person inside, but an inscrutable collection of chancy and contingent preferences that could have played out in any other way. What I take away from this is I'm going to present to you my interpretation of the evidence. I've spent a lot of time thinking about careers, thinking about what it means to be a scientist who leaves academia. But it's my interpretation, it's how I look at things. I hope many of you disagree with me. I expect you to. But I hope even more that you go and talk to other people in all sorts of careers, both within and outside academia, and reflect on it and come to your own conclusions, and that's okay. You don't have to feel pressure to agree with anything I say. Second, tastes are just tastes. Some of you in here love research. You started grad school and you found your calling. That's awesome. Some of you may not be very happy right now. You realized academia and physics is not for you. That's also okay. I suspect most of you are where I was, kind of in between those two poles. So what I want you to take away from the second paragraph is don't feel you have to apologize for what you like or you don't like. They're your tastes, and to say I enjoy something or I don't enjoy something, that's justification enough. So with this quote kind of like at the back of your mind running through the rest of this talk, I have three main goals. Number one is to help you understand my mental frameworks for thinking about careers. So this will be kind of philosophical, just to get you thinking about careers and, again, help you understand what I think. Second is to give you some very concrete tips and tricks that you can take away. How do I look for a job? How do I structure my resume, the bullet points of my resume, so on and so forth. What kind of jobs are available for PhD physicists or undergrads? I realize some undergrads are in the room. And finally, we're going to do a little group exercise. Hopefully we'll have a little fun. We'll get up and dance around a little. And the main point of this group exercise is I'm going to introduce you to my current job as a product manager, give you a little small part of that in the group exercise, help you understand it. So I'll start off with my career journey. I was a pretty standard undergrad physics student. As I said, I went straight from undergrad into grad school. So that was in fall 2003. And I graduated in March 2009. The main thing I want to stress here is over this time, for the most part, I was a pretty typical graduate student. Doing coursework, working on problem sets, going to conferences, preparing papers, so on and so forth. Like all of you. But what I did do is I took the time, which I stress for all of you, is it doesn't have to be a lot of time, But I took some time to engage in some of my outside interests. I was very into science outreach. I was very much into public policy, which I'll get into a little bit. I got some teaching experience, except for one fall when I actually ended up taking a quarter away from grad school. For the most part, this was not a huge part of my life. All of us have extracurricular activities. This is a few hours a week. I did science outreach for about 4 years of grad school, 4 or 5 years. At the most, when it was busiest, that was a few hours a week. I'm not saying you have to do science outreach. What I am saying is that take some time once a week, once a month, to start exploring and thinking about your career and what you might want to do. It will pay off in the long run to spend that time up front. So after grad school, I was very into public policy, passionate about it. I translated that into a fellowship run by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Those are the folks that publish the journal Science. They have a big policy wing, and they run this federal public policy fellowship. For 2 years, I was in Washington, D.C. at the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. The funny thing happened is when I went to D.C., I had prepared for policy for years and years. I realized I didn't actually like it that much. I liked the fellowship, I loved the people I met, I liked the experience, but my day-to-day job didn't work out like I wanted it to. So I ended up moving back to California for personal reasons as well, and I was unemployed for 4.5 months. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so if you're like that, 2 years after I finished my PhD, I was basically starting over, from step one. I was like, what do I want to do? I decided I wanted to work in the private sector. So I did a lot of research, went to career fairs, several of them, learned how to make a one-page resume, and I'll get into some of that later on, and got a job. It was not quite an entry-level job, but basically as a customer-facing engineer. And so for 4 years, starting around January 2012, I was a customer-facing roles. And what I like to say is I was like a guy in Office Space. I worked between the customers and the engineers. And that was actually how we so described our job. And I loved it. Absolutely loved that job. To this day, the first couple years at that job and my company is the best job I've ever had in my pretty young career. Just recently, I transitioned to what is known as a product manager, which is an internal-facing role. Instead of working with customers to help them implement or train them on the product, I now help develop the product with the engineers. And that was pretty recent. And again, we'll do that in the group activity. All right, so now you've seen my career journey. Before I get into some of the mental frameworks, I thought it might be helpful to consider one way of looking at a PhD. I'm going to do that in pictures. Some of you may have seen this. It can be a little polarizing, so I hope I don't offend any of you. It was developed by a computer science professor at the University of Utah. And he says, imagine you have a circle that contains all of human knowledge. As you progress through your education, you deepen and deepen your knowledge. So elementary school, high school, and in college you start specializing a little bit. Master's degree, you specialize a little bit more. And right now, you're all the boundary of human knowledge. You're the edge. You're pushing against it. So you focus and focus on that boundary. And after a while, you make a little dent in the boundary of knowledge. That is your PhD. That was my PhD. And so here you are, and this is how the world looks to you. But don't forget the bigger picture. Now, I really love that for a couple reasons. First is that I was expanding the boundary of knowledge, as are all of you. But also, coming out of my PhD, I realized this is what I felt like I was. I felt like, how do I take my skills? And actually, even coming out of the public policy world, after 2 years of experience, I felt like I had a very limited tool set. How do I take it elsewhere? What I want to convince you is all of you can do this. All of you, even if you have feel you have a very limited skill set, or you feel you're in a very narrow research field, that is not true. You can go from being a PhD and apply it elsewhere, lots of different places. That's something I want you to think about and consider. So with that, we come to my first mental framework. This one is what are the qualities or factors that make someone successful in a job? What makes a good employee in a particular job? And again, I want to go back to that quote at the start. This is my interpretation of the evidence. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I thought about my different experiences. I did kind of just make it up, and I call it the SCIP formula. So any job success ultimately boils down to 4 factors. First one is skills. And I will group skills into 2 broad categories. One category is concrete skills, a specific programming language, a type of lab equipment. Maybe you have sales skills. And second is soft skills. How good are you at relationships, managing people? It came up earlier in conversation. Do you know how to run a meeting, which is a very important skill, but it's a soft skill. Writing, I'm not sure whether it's a hard skill or a soft skill, but it's also a very important skill. Giving talks, public talks. One thing I will have you remember as well is scientists tend to get a lot of experience giving talks, and we're quite good at it compared to a lot of other majors because they simply don't get that experience. That is a sellable skill. Second part, the K, is knowledge. This is your domain knowledge. Do you know international law or internet security protocols? E-commerce platforms, or in my case, plasma physics. And there's an interplay between skills and knowledge. You may have general sales skills, you have done sales jobs, but you may not have the domain knowledge of internet security. And they play off each other. I is IQ. Again, two types. There's general intelligence and social intelligence. So let's drop the modesty for a second. We're all very smart. You're getting a PhD in physics, you have a high IQ, honestly, you're very smart. So that's something you should be proud of, but part of the reason I started developing this formula is what I realized a lot of scientists and grad students tend to think we undersell ourselves on these other areas, and we do have other things, and we hype up IQ a little bit, maybe more than we should. I'm not saying we do it publicly, we're not necessarily arrogant about it, but we are very smart, and I think, we all sometimes consider ourselves, oh, we're so smart, and forget all these other things. And finally, personality, which I think is really underrated. When people think about what will make them happy, what will make them successful in a given job, there are certain personality traits that align better with certain jobs. Some may be more extroverted, some may be more introverted. Sometimes, some jobs like managing, you need to be able to be good at relationships. Not everyone is good at relating to all sorts of different people. And the last two I put on this list, fire drills and to-do list and planning, I think I've classified as personality traits. I'm not a social psychologist or whatever, but essentially, just for me, I've realized I love my calendar and I love planning my calendar. I'm a huge planner. And so even though I've had jobs where fire drill means something happens, you have to drop what you're doing and deal with it, I don't like it. So that's just a personality thing that I have had to develop awareness of. So you could spend some time thinking about what does your personality align with and what kind of jobs might make you happy or where you would succeed based on that personality. What I'm going to highlight, I'm going to break down knowledge into two components. Formal knowledge, which is what we are very good at, the scientific method. Careful testing, A and B. Reading research papers, which is a very careful approach to generating knowledge. And learning by doing. Maybe you don't do a lot of testing and a lot of research papers. You build a quick prototype and roll it out to your customers. I'm sure you could read a lot about what it means to handle difficult customers. You could read books, you could read papers. I think that's something, in my experience, you really only learn by doing. You talk to a lot of customers, you screw up a lot of times, and eventually you develop a knack. And again, I'll highlight IQ. These are what I think as a scientist, just something to be aware of our own biases. And again, I am biased towards that, is I think we tend to really weight heavily this formal knowledge, formal way of generating knowledge and learning and understanding things. There are many ways to understand things. And the way we do it is very, very important and relevant in certain circumstances, but I don't think it's the only way in all circumstances. And I think to come back to this customer example and how to, for example, read a number of customers is something you learn by doing, and it's not very easy to formalize. And again, I want to highlight, we tend to also focus on IQ a little because, again, these are the things we're very good at. Or we have, of the 4 criteria, these are the ones we have in abundance. But when you think about your career and what you want to do next, you should really frame it in all of them, and especially the first 2, especially skills. We all have skills. You can give talks. You have managed projects from beginning to end. That is what a PhD is. You have set deadlines and timelines for yourself, and so on and so forth. And finally, I've amended this to add an L, luck. We can have a great philosophical, theological, political debate about, how much does luck govern our lives? How much are we in control of our lives? I'm not taking a stance. But I have found it helpful to reflect on how lucky I have been and unlucky I have been in various ways over my pretty short career. And that's helped me when I get annoyed and upset and angry, which I was actually very recently in a job. And it's not everything is in my control. There's a lot of times path dependence. You just happen to have stumbled into one field, and that translates to many things down the road. So the main point of that formula is that success in a job is multidimensional, and all of you have those dimensions. All of you have skills, all of you have various types of knowledge, all of you have certain personality traits that make you better suited and less suited to certain jobs, me included. So just remember that it's multidimensional. Okay, so this is how you might think about a job. Now you might be evaluating a certain job. What are the criteria that matter to me, and how do you approach it? So my friend came up with the 3 or 4 Ps, and the reason it's or 4 is that we're not sure where to put it. Notice that this is decreasing importance. First is for the people you're working with. I just imagine my time in lab, and I don't think I would have gone through it without my lab mates. So people, for me, is the most important. Second is project or product. What you're working on, does it excite you? Does it give you meaning in life? Or if not, which it's hard to find that type of work, is it helping you gain skills that you can use later on, help you achieve your medium or long-term career goals? Finally, pay. Money is awesome. When you graduate, you're going to realize making more money is actually quite awesome. But even then, I put it as least important. And again, not saying you should always do this. I was very seriously considering recently taking a big pay cut because I was trying to transition to a different field. I was in a job that I wasn't quite happy in. I ended up not having to do that. I didn't get a pay raise, which is also people will say, oh, when you change jobs, you should get a pay raise. I did not. They matched my salary. So money isn't everything. And finally, this is biased by my time living in both the San Francisco Bay Area and Washington, D.C., proximity. Many people I know routinely commute an hour and a half to work. I can't imagine it. I don't know what they're thinking, but that's something, again, taste is taste. If you're fine with that, you're fine with that. There's no right or wrong answer to this. My final framework. You have the golden ratio, the golden triangle, the golden corral. Thank you. My wife said no to that. It's a dad joke. Thank you. We came up with a golden intersection, my wife and I. So, again, what will make you happy in a job? Again, this is kind of completely made up. I spent some time thinking about it. I like to think of 3 factors. So, when I go forward, when I was deciding on when to take jobs, when I look back on certain jobs I may have not been completely happy in, I've often been able to decompose it in terms of these 3 factors. 1, are you using your gifts? We're all talented in certain ways. We all have certain tendencies in what we like to do, which is probably where we're gifted in. If you're using what you're good at and you're talented in, that's one of the 3 components that'll I think will make you happy. Second is, are you having an impact? Are you in the organization, in your product, in something? Are you feel like you're making a difference? Maybe in the world, or it can be on a large scale or a small scale, but are you having an impact? And finally, are you feeling challenged? I think you may not ever hit all 3 of them. My last job, I hit 2 out of the 3. I was using my gifts and talents in terms of working in between customers, the non-technical folks and the technical folks. I was having an impact. They were very happy with my work. But the details of how I was working out and a number of reasons I just was not feeling personally challenged, and consequently, I wasn't completely happy in that position. So, just another framework for you. So here's the framework summary. Skills, knowledge, IQ, personality. People, project / product. Pay, going 3rd, and somewhere in there, depending if you want to have it or not, proximity. I don't like long commutes. And finally, are you using your gifts? Are you feeling challenged? Are you having an impact? There's some mental frameworks that I've developed. So now, what we're going to do is transition to some of the more concrete tips that I've developed over the years. First is, you may be wondering, where do I go from here? Okay, maybe you want to do a postdoc, maybe you don't. What are some concrete things you can do to look at various jobs or various career pathways? First thing I will recommend is check out the site Versatile PhD. It's an awesome site. It was founded by a humanities PhD, and its mission is to help grad students and new PhDs envision, prepare for, and excel in non-academic careers. They have really cool things like discussion groups and forums. You can be paired with a mentor. They have this career tool finder type search thing. Disclosure, I do know the founder, and we've had a few conversations. I have written an essay for that site. I don't know if Oregon's an institutional subscriber, but there's some benefits that come with that. But it is a cool site, and I think they're doing a lot of stuff, and they're increasingly focused on STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, i.e. people like us.
I looked, and Oregon is not an institutional.
Okay, but there's still a lot of stuff available for free, just so you know. I think it's really cool, this site in general. I think the idea is really awesome. Second is, I've talked a lot about this multidimensionality, and we all have all sorts of different skills. Well, you have technical skills. In fact, that's what you have most of. It's perfectly okay to market yourself in terms of your technical skills. Something to be aware of. You will command a higher salary. If you say, I am a PhD and I know X, whether it's data science or lab equipment or whatever it is, you will get a much higher salary. Or if you apply for jobs that say we hire PhDs, you will also get a higher salary. I consciously decided I didn't want that. So I sacrificed some initial starting salary in 2011. But again, subjective, that's one career path. See, I'm going to just initially start my career by using my technical skills and deepening myself in that way. Career fairs and LinkedIn. I've already told you about my experience at a career fair, my first job, which built my career, and I wouldn't have become a product manager if I hadn't taken that first step at a career fair. That set me down that path. LinkedIn is another way. I've done jobs through both. So it does happen. It can happen. This is actually one of my regrets, and I hope to correct it someday. I really, really wish I had done management consulting. I still might. They hire a lot of PhDs, especially technical PhDs. They're the big three, McKinsey, Bain, and Boston Consulting. They routinely hire PhDs. But there are all sorts of other management consulting companies out there. Slalom's another one. You can just research. You'll work very hard for a few years, travel a fair amount. After that, you'll have a ton of skills and be very employable. And it's just something that I hope to do at one point. It's something I think I would like. Fellowships. I've spoken a little bit about the Washington, D.C. Science Policy Fellowships. I'm most familiar with those. And I should have mentioned earlier, if anyone during the Q&A wants to get into, learn more about the application process, how it works, so on and so forth, I'm more than happy to talk about it. But there are all sorts of fellowships. There are science communication fellowships, media fellowships. So that's essentially another way of going into doing more education. So there's another path you can consider. Finally, more school. I've met PhDs who went back and got an MBA, who went back to law school. Nothing entirely wrong with that. I suspect most of you will not want more school. We tend to not want more school, but it does happen. And again, it's perfectly okay. A lot of, especially something like an MBA program, is geared towards finding you a certain type of work, which you may find it hard to break into. For example, when I was trying to become a product manager, one of the hardest things I've ever done is try to go from a customer-facing role to becoming a product manager, which is an internal-facing role, while also switching companies. I was talking to one of my friends who's had a very long career in the IT industry, and he said people actually go back and get an MBA doing what you're trying to do. They couldn't, so they go just to become a product manager. So more school is always an option. So questions to ask, again, these are questions I've asked myself. Again, I've said a lot about being multidimensional and you have various skills, but you should ask yourself an honest question. Do you want to keep your technical skills? You will lose them. In my case, pretty soon. I see an integral sign and I start shaking a little bit. I know physics, I can speak about physics, but don't ask me to actually solve a Fourier transform. I will run. I'm actually quite proud. I can still talk physics because my wife is a professor and I talk physics with my friends. I have many academic friends. I can talk physics, but I can't derive anything. And I don't think I'm stupider. Maybe I am, I don't think I am, but I've just lost those skills. You get used to, if you don't use them, you lose them. So if you've decided for yourself, I want to always know how to solve PDEs, that's limiting your career path. And that's fine, but again, taste is taste. So it is something to think about. Are you a breadth person or a depth person? Right now, you are a depth person, I'm telling you. PhD is you're getting deeper and deeper in a certain small topic. I've realized over my life that I am actually intrinsically, I like breadth more. I'm fine not being an expert in any one field. I like working with sales and marketing and understanding all the finance and a little bit of engineering. So that's a trade-off I've made, but it is kind of a trade-off. These are trade-offs. And finally, how good are you at just working without much direction in a state of complete ambiguity? I realize I'm actually not. I prefer to be a little managed, especially initially in a new field or a new job. I prefer to be a little overmanaged. Again, it's a trade-off. To say someone is good at being managed is also a compliment. Is a compliment. To say someone is good at being very self-directed and not knowing what's going on and still figuring out a way to manufacture work for themselves is also, they're both good qualities. I hew much more to be managed. And it's something I'm trying to develop myself to get better at that. I just know I'm not that good at it. So if you know that's the type of person you are, that's awesome. Be aware of it and be able to talk about that. So now I've given you some questions to ask yourself, some career paths. What are some other concrete things you can do to actually help yourself get a job? One-page resume. I know we all have done lots of talks and conferences and publications, especially initially. They'll tell you, maybe one page is not a strict number. Just for yourself, initially try to make it a strict number, to force yourself into that. If you attend resume workshops or ever studied about it, you'll hear this STAR statement come up a lot. It stands for situation, action, result. How you frame your bullet points. So your resume is going to have bullet points of some kind. And they say the ideal way to say it is to describe a situation. The test quality assurance testing procedures were taking very long. You did a certain action. I therefore took it upon myself to write a new testing procedure and come up with an automated testing script. Result being the testing time decreased by 20%. That was completely made up. I did not do that. Honestly, I don't think any one of my resume bullet points are in that. It's a nice goal to achieve. If you look at these examples they have online, some of them end up being pretty long. I've shortened it to the so what statement. If you're going to do one out of the STAR, make sure you have a result. What is the impact or outcome? You're going to have an action of some kind. So action, result. The A and the R are the most important parts. Always say what happened. Smile. It's underappreciated. It does help in your interviews, at career fairs, all the time. Smile. I've gotten that advice, and I'm offering that advice as well. Research companies and jobs. Like, it does show if you spend the time, and some of this stuff isn't fun. Like, making a resume sucks. Like, the first time I had to make my one-page resume, it took me hours and hours and hours. And I had the benefit of, in my fellowship, they had a big one-day resume boot camp. And it still wasn't fun. So, like, along those lines, researching companies and jobs isn't fun. So at the career fair where I got that first job, the week leading up to it, I spent hours reading through the companies, researching the jobs, and thinking about what I wanted to say. The upshot is, even though none of those initial jobs worked out, during the day, as I got more and more comfortable talking about myself, talking about what I wanted, explaining things, and simply working the schmoozing game a little bit, because that is what it is. And at the end of the day, I did end up getting a job, and I honestly believe it's because I'd spent that early time getting better at having that conversation and making that pitch. And so I've called it a 30-second pitch, 1 minute, 15 seconds. 15 seconds is probably a little short, but have a few sentences about what you want to do and why and what you're looking for. Practice it. Literally, just look in front of the mirror and practice it. So with that, before we get to the hopefully fun group exercise, and I want it'll be 20 minutes by 5 o'clock because I want to leave at least 10 minutes for Q&A. I'm going to offer some final thoughts. So I actually got this advice in an interview. I asked her, I'm someone who's looking to change his careers. What advice would you give to me? And I just really loved it. She said, never think anyone's job is easy. No matter what it is, no matter how awesome you are, never, ever, ever think anyone's job is easy. Or you could do a better job. Second is be open to serendipity. It goes back earlier to my statement about luck. If you had told me a few years ago I would be out of the policy world, and I'd be perfectly okay being out of the policy world, I'm working as a product manager at this random software company in Denver, I would have laughed at you. Many people who know me can tell you how much I love policy and politics. And to this day, I was never about capitalism. I was like, I'm not going to work at a private company, come on. I'm going to go to DC and save the world. And I think some of my college friends tease me about, they still don't believe I work at a company. It's all a big act. So be conscious of the possibility that your life may end up somewhere completely random and you don't know. That's okay. Your career is going to take all sorts of twists and turns, and you're all pretty young starting out right now in your career. And another thing is you don't know yourself. Do you know what makes you happy? And again, I come back to my experience in policy. I didn't know that I would not like policy. I didn't know I would like the private sector. So that's just something to think about. Do you really know what makes you happy? Do you really know what will give you satisfaction? And you may not. Along the lines of that is no job is perfect. So a very common thing is you are really excited about something. A common theme is you're very excited about something. You start actually doing it and you're like, maybe PhD research is like that for some of you. But the flip side can also be true. Maybe you're not that initially excited about it. You have no choice. You end up taking it and you end up loving it. Again, I'm an example of that. So that first job from that career fair, which I talk about a lot because it really was like a transformative experience in my life. The COO had to lobby me and woo me. It was a small company, so it's not that impressive I was talking to the COO. Everyone talked to the COO. And I remember sitting in that meeting with him and he's saying, this will be good for you, this will be good for you. I was like, do I really want to work at this software company no one's heard of? And I ended up loving it. So there are two sides of that coin. You know, you may love something more than you think you will, and you may end up not loving something as much as you think you will. So just nothing is perfect, and don't hold out for this perfect job, because it really doesn't exist. There is no perfect job. And along that, work is overrated. Especially, again, I'm not that old, you know, some of you may be older than me. As I've gotten older, though, I've started thinking more and more, how important is work to me? Is work, you know, people like us, we're smart and driven and successful and, you know, ambitious, we want to, you know, go out and just dominate the world. But is that what will give you satisfaction in life? That will help you support your family, contribute to the world, and all those great things we all care about? Is work the best way to do that? So although I've left the policy world, what I've realized, I just didn't want policy as a career. So I still care about it passionately, I write about it, I do talks like this, I'm still engaged in the policy world. But for me, the thing I care about is just contributing to it in some way. So just, is your career the most important thing to you? And if it is, awesome. If it's not, don't feel like it has to be. And I think especially in America, we tend to, you know, we're all very type in, you know, work is awesome. And again, that's fine for some of us, but it doesn't have to be.